Hello and welcome. As you can see, I've changed my setup a little bit. But anyway, I've mentioned in some past videos that growing up I didn't really have a ton of money for video games. Back then obviously I didn't have a job as a kid. I just had a small allowance for like keeping up with chores and stuff like that, just like a few bucks a week. And back then, perhaps if you were in the same boat, maybe you were like me and your bread and butter for buying games was that section you see in like big chain stores like Target or Walmart that has a lot of like budget-oriented games, usually priced between like 10 and 20 bucks. And yeah, sometimes you'd find like greatest hits releases of decent console games, older PC games that dropped in price, or something like today's game, Secret Service Security Breach. This is actually one I remember seeing back in the day in that section, and I was always curious about it because it looks wonderfully generic. But I never picked it up. But I remembered seeing it, or I thought I remembered seeing it, because apparently I remembered seeing a game that hadn't been released yet. You see, this is the second game. There's more than one. And it came out in 2003, and yeah, I remembered seeing it before then. So yeah, but it's easy enough to mix up. The box doesn't give any indication of it being a sequel, and the cover art is like similar enough that it's easy to mix up. So yes, this is Secret Service Security Breach, developed by 4D Rulers and published by Activision under their Activision Value banner. Taking a look at the box, which is adorned with this high-intensity artwork, surely setting the tone for the action ahead. Man, wait, is that Rudy Giuliani? Inside the gatefold, we've got some screenshots and marketing blurbs, letting you know how sick this game is going to be, and the back is more of the same. We have 9 awesome weapons, 10 heart-pounding missions, and wicked enemies. I can't wait. I'll be playing this on my Windows XP system, which really needs a new DVD drive. Good lord, that is a terrible sound. Starting up the game, we're treated to absolutely no cutscenes or cinematics, just some logos. The main menu is also pretty bare bones, but going into the display options, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that the game not only supports widescreen aspect ratios, but goes up to 1920 by 1080. That's actually pretty cool for a game from 2003, let alone a budget title like this. Firing up a mission, we're given a pretty sparse mission briefing while the game loads. Now, I know the first game was a tactical shooter, and I wasn't sure if this would be in the same vein, or maybe even something like SWAT 4, where apprehending enemies non-lethally is a thing, and oh yeah, no, it's a shooting gallery. In Secret Service, you play as Dennis Sharp, the top Secret Service agent in the country, according to the box, which seems kind of at odds with the game itself because you start out doing pretty low-level missions and get promoted later on in the game. But yeah, as Sharp, it's your job to mostly kill a lot of dudes. Over the course of the campaign, you're taken to a variety of exotic locations, such as a storage unit, a hotel, a hospital, a courthouse, a train to western Pennsylvania, an office building, a pier, and a mansion in South Florida. The gameplay is pretty straightforward. The mission design is linear in nature, and you've just got to make it from point A to point B, kill everyone in your path, and not die. Sometimes the game throws in extra objectives like finding crates of counterfeit cash, defusing bombs, or, unsurprising considering the Secret Service theme, escort and protection duty. You'll usually start out with a basic pistol and get better weapons from fallen enemies as you progress. The enemy AI is basic. They don't really use any advanced tactics, they just run straight at you with guns blazing until you put them down. Honestly, the game is a pretty mindless shooting gallery, but considering this is a budget title, I can't really hold that against it. And honestly, sometimes I enjoy this kind of gameplay. Clever tactics or fast-paced action are cool, but sometimes I just want to kick it and mow down a bunch of guys in an office building. So yeah, Secret Service appeals to me on that level. On top of that, the graphics are surprisingly decent for what it is. They're not perfect, and some of the shadows and lighting are way too contrasty with not a lot of shadow detail, so some bits are excessively dark and not in an aesthetically pleasing way, but yeah. The textures are simple, but they're competent and sharp looking, and I was really impressed to see bump mapping used pretty heavily throughout the game, because that was the shit back in the early 2000s, and would become more of a standard thing in games later in that decade. Character models are, they're not amazing, but they're not terrible. For some reason, they actually remind me a lot of Hitman Blood Money from 2006. So yeah, the game looks fine. Solid. No complaints. Unfortunately, not everything is quite as cheery. The few gameplay mechanics Secret Service has, other than shoot these people, are kind of busted. The enemy AI is one thing. It's not great, but it's not the worst I've ever seen. But companion AI, however, oh my god. So yeah, as previously mentioned, the game features a lot of escorting and protecting people, you know, like a Secret Service guy. These sections are infuriating. You can command whoever you're escorting with the use key, and it's pretty simplistic. It alternates between stay here and follow me. That's fine, I don't think you really need anything more than that in this game, but they never quite listen. I'll tell someone to stay put, and they'll stay back for a minute, and then follow me anyway, and frequently get themselves killed. And they're usually pretty defenseless, and enemies will often ignore you to target whoever you're escorting. Or I'll have the opposite problem. I'll command them to follow, and they'll just not? They have serious problems with pathfinding, especially considering the levels can be kind of maze-like at times, and they'll try and choose the most direct path to you, trying to walk through walls and obstacles rather than, you know, walking around them. There's also a recurring problem with them just standing completely in your way, blocking your path, and you can't push past them. My gameplay strategy in these segments is usually just to run ahead of them and hope they don't follow, or just get lost somewhere behind me, clear out whatever enemies I can, and then go retrieve them and hope they'll actually be able to follow me to the end. The combat isn't the worst I've encountered, but it's not brilliant. Movement speed is pretty slow, and enemies can sometimes take a surprising number of direct hits without dying, even a shotgun blast directly to the torso. And reload speed is incredibly slow, especially on weapons like the submachine gun. And in most shooters, if you're in the middle of a firefight and you run out of ammo and don't want to be vulnerable while reloading, you might switch to your sidearm or another weapon. Not the case in Secret Service. If you empty out your clip and continue firing, you automatically reload, which is normal, but you have no choice but to wait for that painfully long animation to finish. Oh, and if you're using the shotgun and say you use like 3 shots and want to reload before advancing to the next area, the animation acts as if you've emptied the entire magazine, so it's equally long whether you fired 1 shot or all 6. Reloading and trying to stay alive while completely vulnerable in this way is a huge chore in this game, especially considering how many hits enemies can sustain before dying. Certain stronger enemies, like these 1930s looking gangster dudes in sharp pinstripe suits, are seriously robust, and one real cheap thing I notice is that, they don't have to reload? So you can spray them with 30 submachine gun rounds, get stuck reloading, and they just keep blasting you. And again, it's not like Sharp is light on his toes. On that note, eagle-eyed viewers might notice that in some of these clips, I'm getting hit and not taking any damage. In the interest of transparency, I should clarify that in some of these captured segments, I did in fact enable God mode. Shamelessly. I did, however, do a playthrough without that enabled outside of this video, but for the sake of capturing this footage in a timely manner and with my sanity intact, yeah, that's a thing I did. Anyway, yeah, I feel like there's a huge difference between a game being challenging and rewarding you for skilled play once you've mastered the systems in place, and a game that's unintuitive to the point where the deck is stacked against you no matter what you do. And I think all too often, Secret Service falls into the latter category a lot of the time. Having said all that, I keep having to remind myself this is a budget game, and I should keep my expectations a little more grounded. I mean, this is a game that was probably made by like 10 people on a McChicken budget. So yeah, the gameplay's a little busted sometimes, and it's rough around the edges here and there, and there's no story to speak of. But for a game that retailed new for like, what, $20 at most? You know, when I keep that in mind and I'm going through the game, I start to be less critical and enjoy Secret Service for what it is. Its genericness and lack of charm kind of adds its own charm. It's a few hours of mindless fun, and I was prepared to leave this video on a very positive note. But then there's the very last mission. I'll let you watch this and just see for yourself.
Get to the president. He's out on the balcony. Escort him safely to the garage, where we'll pick you up.
Follow me.
What the hell was that? Let's try that again.
Sharp, I just heard from a reliable informant that the Largos are planning an all-out war on Reiner's home tonight. Get to the president. He's out on the balcony. Escort him safely to the garage, where we'll pick you up.
Alright, so yeah, in the final mission of any game, I expect it to be, you know, the big one, the final showdown. But this is dumb. Like, come on now, I've said in the past that I'm not the greatest FPS player, but you can't do this. Like, every limitation or just broken game mechanic comes to light here because you're just getting absolutely pummeled. It's like the developers are telling you, hey, you've made it really far, thanks so much for playing our game. Also, fuck you! I looked up a walkthrough on YouTube to see if anyone else actually pulled this off or if it's even possible. I mean, surely it has to be. Well, such a video does exist, and I'll link it below. And the guy pulled it off, but this dude seems to be like esports level good compared to me. And it seems like he did a really good job memorizing enemy movements and spawn points and all that. In the video's comments, he admits that this game was insanely hard, and in his own words, one of the hardest walkthroughs he's done. So yeah, I don't like to leave a game incomplete if I'm doing a video on it, but in this case I'm gonna have to throw in the towel. I'm sure I can do it with enough tries, but that's more time and capture footage to sift through than I'm willing to deal with. So in closing, I did enjoy this game in spite of the issues it has, and I think it was worth my time for the $3 I paid for it. Sans the final level, which goes beyond just being difficult and straight into being a slap in the face for even playing the game. The box advertises 10 heart-pounding missions. If they'd left it at 9, it'd be a much more polished final product. And that is Secret Service Security Breach. It's been fun experiencing a game I was always curious about and seeing what kind of game you could get if you were a broke kid in 2003 and had a few extra bucks in your pocket. If you enjoyed this video, I do this kind of thing semi-regularly at least, and blah blah, like, subscribe, whatever, I'm on Twitter, etc, etc. And as always, thank you very much for watching.